The crash and the encounter. The planet was a desolate wasteland, its surface cracked and dry under the oppressive heat of two suns. Kale's ship sputtered and groaned as it descended, the engines failing one by one. He gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white, as the ground rushed up to meet him. With a deafening crash, the ship skidded across the rocky terrain, sending plumes of dust into the air. When the dust settled, Kale sat in the silence, his heart pounding in his chest. He was alive, but for how long? He stepped out of the wreckage, his boots crunching on the brittle ground. The air was thin, and the heat was unbearable. His survival instincts kicked in as he surveyed the area. He needed shelter, water, and a way to repair his ship. But as he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The planet was supposed to be uninhabited, yet the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. It wasn't long before he found the source of his unease. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and slender, with skin that shimmered like liquid silver. Her eyes glowed a soft blue, and her movements were graceful, almost hypnotic. Kale froze, unsure whether to approach or retreat. She was unlike anything he had ever seen, and yet, there was something undeniably alluring about her. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice melodic but laced with caution. "Why have you come here?" Kale raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "My name is Kale. I'm a human explorer. My ship crashed, and I need help." She studied him for a moment, her gaze piercing. "Humans are dangerous," she said finally. "They destroy everything they touch." "Not all of us," Kale replied, his voice steady. "I mean you no harm. I just want to survive." The alien woman hesitated, her glowing eyes narrowing as she weighed his words. Finally, she nodded. "I am Zanara. Follow me, but know this, if you betray my trust, I will not hesitate to end you." Kale followed her through the rocky terrain, his mind racing. Zanara moved with an otherworldly grace, her silver skin catching the light of the twin suns. She led him to a hidden cave, its entrance concealed by a curtain of vines. Inside, the air was cooler, and the walls were lined with strange, glowing crystals. "This is my home," Zanara said, gesturing to the cave. "You may stay here until you can repair your ship. But do not touch anything without my permission." Kale nodded, his curiosity piqued. "Thank you. I won't cause any trouble." As the days passed, Kale and Zanara began to form a tentative bond. She taught him about the planet's history, how her people had once thrived here before a catastrophic event wiped them out. Kale, in turn, shared stories of his travels, of the wonders and dangers he had encountered in the vastness of space. One evening, as they sat by the cave's entrance watching the twin suns set, Zanara turned to him. "Why do you explore the stars, Kale? What drives you to leave your home and risk your life?" Kale thought for a moment before answering. "I guess it's the unknown. The idea that there's always something new to discover, something that challenges what we think we know. And maybe, I'm searching for a place where I belong." Zanara's eyes softened, and for the first time, Kale saw a flicker of vulnerability in her. "I understand that feeling," she said quietly. "I have been alone for so long, I almost forgot what it was like to have someone to talk to." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them. It was a connection, fragile but undeniable. But before either of them could say more, a low growl echoed through the cave. Zanara's eyes widened in alarm. "We're not alone," she whispered. "Something has found us." Kale's heart raced as he grabbed a makeshift weapon. "What is it?" "A predator," Zanara replied, her voice tense. "It's drawn to the energy of your ship. We need to move, now." They fled deeper into the cave, the growls growing louder behind them. Kale's mind raced as he tried to think of a way to fight back. But Zanara had other plans. She stopped suddenly and turned to face him. "Trust me," she said, her eyes glowing brighter. Do exactly as I say. Before Kale could respond, Zenara placed her hands on his chest. A surge of energy coursed through him, and he felt his body grow lighter, almost weightless. The world around him blurred, and when his vision cleared, they were standing outside the cave, far from the predator's reach. Kale stared at her in awe. How did you do that? It's a gift, Zenara replied, her voice tinged with sadness. One of the few things left of my people. But it comes at a cost. Kale wanted to ask more, but the look in her eyes stopped him. Instead, he simply nodded. Thank you. You saved my life. Zenara looked away, her silver skin shimmering in the fading light. We should keep moving. The predator won't give up easily. As they walked, Kale couldn't help but feel a growing admiration for Zenara. She was strong, resilient, and unlike anyone he had ever met. And despite her initial fear of him, she had risked her own safety to protect him. It was a gesture that spoke volumes, and Kale knew that their bond, however fragile, was something worth fighting for. The forbidden connection. The twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of violet and gold. Kale and Zenara sat at the edge of a crumbling stone terrace, part of an ancient structure they discovered deep in the planet's desolate heart. The ruins stretched endlessly, collapsed towers, fractured bridges, and glyph-covered walls whispered of a civilization that had once thrived. Zenara traced her fingers over a carved symbol, her silver skin glowing faintly in the twilight. This was a temple, she said quietly. My ancestors communed here with the stars. Now it's just dust. Kale watched her, the way her luminous eyes softened with grief. What happened to them? He asked. She hesitated. Pride. We believed ourselves eternal. When the skies began to darken, our leaders refused to flee. They thought their power could save us. Her voice broke. It couldn't. A warm wind stirred the air, carrying the scent of metallic dust. Kale moved closer, his shoulder brushing hers. The contact sent a jolt through him, her skin was cool, like moonlight given form. You're not alone anymore, he said. Zenara turned to him, her gaze piercing. Why do you care, human? You'll leave once your ship is repaired. Maybe I don't want to, he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Silence hung between them, thick and charged. Then, a low rumble echoed through the ruins. Zenara tensed. The predator, she hissed. It's followed us. They sprinted through the labyrinth of stone, the creature's snarls reverberating off the walls. Kale's pulse raced as he spotted a narrow crevice in a nearby wall. Here. He grabbed Zenara's hand, pulling her into the tight space just as the beast lunged. Its claws scraped the stone, missing them by inches. They pressed together, breaths mingling, hearts pounding in sync. Hours passed. The predator eventually retreated, leaving them in suffocating darkness. Zenara's bioluminescent markings flickered to life, casting a soft blue glow. Kale stared, mesmerized. You're stunning, he murmured. She stiffened. This is not the time for. I mean it, he interrupted. You're alive, Zenara. Even in all this ruin, you burn brighter than anything I've seen. Her defenses crumbled. She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his chest. I've forgotten what it feels like to be seen, she whispered. Days turned into nights as they explored the temple. Kale's ingenuity paired with Zenara's knowledge of her people's tech, together, they activated dormant systems, revealing holographic archives of her civilization's history. Look, she breathed, pointing to a projection of towering cities intertwined with glowing flora. We called this place Vera, the Eternal Garden. It's beautiful, Kale said. But you're more beautiful. Zenara's cheeks flushed a delicate indigo. Your words are dangerous, human. So are your eyes, he countered, stepping closer. They make it hard to think. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. Is that why you tripped over that rubble earlier? Absolutely. He grinned. Distracted by your grace. Their banter faded as the hologram shifted, showing a star map. Zenara froze. These coordinates, they lead to a vault. My people stored their greatest treasure there, an energy source capable of reviving dead worlds. Her voice trembled. If it's real. We'll find it, Kale said firmly. Together. That night, under a canopy of unfamiliar stars, they shared rations beside a crackling fire. Zenara's markings glowed brighter as she laughed at Kale's story of a botched mission on a ice planet. You accidentally adopted a six-legged space wolf. It licked my face. What was I supposed to do? He mimed the creature's slobbery tongue, and she dissolved into giggles. The sound faded as their eyes met. Kale reached out, tucking a strand of her silken, moon-white hair behind her ear. Her breath hitched. Kale, she whispered, we shouldn't. He kissed her. It was soft at first, a question, not a demand. Zenara's lips were cooler than his, tasting of starlight and something electric. Then she surged against him, her hands tangling in his hair as the kiss deepened. Her markings flared, bathing them in azure light. When they finally broke apart, her chest heaved. This is forbidden, she gasped. My people, they never. Your people aren't here, Kale said, his voice rough. We are. She kissed him this time, fierce and hungry. Their bodies pressed together, the heat between them defying the desert's chill. But as Kale's hand slid up her back, she stiffened. A low hum vibrated through the air, mechanical, alien. Zenara pulled away, fear replacing desire in her eyes. Hunters, she hissed. They've found us. In the distance, spotlights pierced the sky. Massive ships descended, their hulls marked with jagged crimson sigils. Kale grabbed his pulse rifle. Who are they? Slavers, Zenara spat. They've stalked me for cycles. My abilities, they want to sell them to the highest bidder. A plasma blast shattered the rocks beside them. Run! Kale yelled. They fled into the ruins, the hunters' drones close behind. Zenara's powers flared, she bent light around them, creating illusions to mislead their pursuers. Kale returned fire, his shots precise. Left, he shouted, spotting a hidden passage. They tumbled into a buried chamber, sealing the entrance behind them. In the darkness, pressed together, their ragged breaths slowly steadied. You fight well, Zenara said, her lips brushing his neck. You're not so bad yourself, he replied, shivering at her touch. She traced his jawline. If we survive this. When we survive, he corrected. A smile curved her lips. When we survive, show me more of these human distractions. Outside, the hunters' war cries echoed. But in that moment, Kale didn't care. He'd found something worth fighting for. Whispers of Destiny. The crystalline spires of Haven Station glittered against the backdrop of swirling nebulae, casting prismatic shadows across Nova and Rowan's quarters. Nova's delicate azure form floated gracefully near the viewport, her luminescent skin casting a soft glow across the room. At just over 2 feet tall, she had learned to navigate the human-sized space with remarkable agility, using her species' natural ability to manipulate local gravity fields. The Council's transmission arrived, she said softly, turning to face Rowan. Her silver eyes held a mixture of concern and determination. They're demanding I return to the Lemurian Collective immediately. Rowan ran a hand through his dark hair, his broad shoulders tense with worry. The past 3 months with Nova had been the most extraordinary of his life. What had begun as a rescue mission had blossomed into something neither of them had expected, a connection that transcended their physical differences. What did you tell them? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Nova's fierce independence was one of the many things that had drawn him to her. She glided closer, a mischievous smile playing across her luminescent lips. I informed them that my research on human-Lemurian relations requires extensive first-hand study. Her tiny hand traced along his jaw, sending shivers down his spine. Very extensive study. Rowan chuckled, carefully wrapping his hand around her waist. Nova's gravity manipulation allowed her to feel as light as a feather or match his mass at will, making their intimate moments possible. Is that what we're calling it now? Among other things, she purred, floating up to eye level. Her silver eyes darkened with desire. Would you like to assist me with today's research? Their kiss was electric, Nova's natural bioluminescence flaring with passion. Rowan had long since stopped questioning how perfectly they fit together despite their size difference. Nova's control over gravitational fields meant she could adjust her mass and resistance at will, allowing them to explore their intimacy in ways that defied conventional physics. But their moment of bliss was interrupted by the station's alert system. Attention all personnel. Unidentified vessels approaching. Configuration matches Lemurian enforcement fleet. Nova pulled back, her glow dimming slightly. They're not accepting my refusal as gracefully as I'd hoped. Rowan moved quickly to the command console, reviewing the sensor data. 3 warships, heavily armed. They're not here for a diplomatic discussion. The collective doesn't believe in letting assets go, Nova said bitterly. Especially ones with my particular abilities. She placed her tiny hand on his arm. Rowan, there's something I haven't told you. The reason they want me back so badly. You don't have to explain, he started, but she shook her head. I do. I'm not just any Lemurian. I'm a Nexus, a rare genetic variant capable of amplifying and sharing our natural abilities with others. The collective uses us to power their most advanced technology. Her silver eyes met his. That's why I ran. I refuse to be their living battery anymore. Rowan's protective instincts flared. They're not taking you back. Not if you don't want to go. Nova's smile was bittersweet. My brave human. Always ready to challenge the impossible. She floated closer, pressing her forehead to his. But the collective has ways of forcing compliance. If they capture me, they'll use neural suppressants to control me. I can't let that happen. Then we run, Rowan said firmly. My ship's prepped and ready. We can be halfway to the outer rim before they know we're gone. They'll follow us everywhere, Nova whispered. Unless. Her glow brightened with sudden determination. Unless we give them a reason to stop. What are you thinking? Nova's silver eyes sparkled with that familiar mix of mischief and brilliance that had first captured his heart. The collective's greatest fear is that a Nexus might bond permanently with another species. It would make their control impossible, as the bond would override any artificial suppressants. Rowan's heart raced as he understood her meaning. You mean? A complete joining of our beings, she confirmed, her tiny form radiating intense energy. It's never been done between our species, but theoretically. She bit her lip. It would be dangerous. The energy involved could kill us both. Or it could give us everything we want, Rowan finished. He cupped her glowing form in his hands. Freedom. A future. Together. The station shuddered as the Lemurian ships began their approach. Nova's glow pulsed with growing urgency. We don't have much time. If we're going to try this. Rowan silenced her with a kiss. I trust you. Completely. Nova's smile was radiant as she pressed her hands to his chest. Then let me show you what it means to truly join with a Lemurian. The air around them began to crackle with energy as Nova's natural luminescence expanded, enveloping them both in a cocoon of swirling light. Rowan gasped as he felt her consciousness brush against his, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. Their physical forms began to blur at the edges, energy and matter intermingling in ways that defied understanding. Through their growing connection, Rowan felt Nova's fears, her hopes, her absolute trust in him. He opened himself fully to her, letting his own emotions flow freely between them. The station's warnings faded to background noise as they lost themselves in the merger, their beings intertwining on levels both physical and spiritual. Nova's natural ability to manipulate energy found resonance in Rowan's human capacity for adaptation and change. Where their differences had once seemed insurmountable, they now found perfect complementarity. As the transformation reached its peak, their shared consciousness exploded with sensation. Every cell in Rowan's body sang with Nova's energy, while she experienced the solid strength of his human form. They were no longer simply touching, they were becoming something entirely new, something neither human nor Lemurian, but a perfect synthesis of both. The process was intense, overwhelming, yet neither of them felt fear. In this space between spaces, they were exactly where they belonged. Together. Echoes of light. The aftermath of Nova and Rowan's joining transformed Haven Station's medical bay into a spectrum of shifting lights. Their merged energies continued to pulse and swirl, casting ethereal patterns across the worried faces of the medical staff. Dr. Jasmine Singh, the station's chief xenobiologist, had never seen anything quite like it. "Their vital signs are extraordinary," she murmured, studying the holographic readouts floating above their examination pod. "The human cellular structure is somehow perfectly integrating with Lemurian energy patterns. It shouldn't be possible." Through their newly forged bond, Nova and Rowan experienced consciousness as a shared symphony. Every sensation, every thought, flowed between them in waves of light and emotion. Rowan could feel Nova's essence intertwined with his own, her natural luminescence now a part of his being. His human form had adapted to channel her energy, while still maintaining its physical structure. Nova's delicate form now shimmered with a deeper radiance, her silver eyes carrying hints of Rowan's earthen brown. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated through their bond. "The joining was more complete than I imagined possible. We're truly something new now." A sudden commotion outside the medical bay drew their attention. The Lemurian enforcement fleet had docked with Haven Station, and their representatives were demanding immediate access. Station security was doing their best to delay them, but time was running out. Rowan sat up, marveling at how his body now seemed to glow faintly from within. Through their connection, he could feel Nova's anxiety spike, but also her fierce determination. "They're going to be quite surprised when they try their neural suppressants," she said with a hint of satisfaction. More than surprised, Rowan agreed, discovering he could now manipulate the local gravity field himself, though not with Nova's natural grace. Their shared abilities were still settling, finding balance between his human physicality and her Lemurian energy manipulation. Dr. Singh quickly transferred their medical data to a secure server. "Whatever you two have become, it's unprecedented. The Lemurian Collective has no legal claim over a completely new life form." She smiled. "Especially one that's technically part human and therefore under Earth Alliance protection." The medical bay doors slid open, revealing three tall, luminescent figures in ornate enforcement armor. Their stern faces registered shock at the sight before them, their precious nexus physically and energetically bonded with a human, their auras visibly intertwined. The lead enforcer, Commander Vex, stepped forward. His voice carried the artificial resonance of authority. "Nexus Nova, you have violated multiple collective protocols. You will submit to extraction and rehabilitation immediately." Nova floated up from the examination pod, her tiny form radiating defiance. The air around her crackled with shared power. "I am no longer simply a Nexus, Commander. Nor am I bound by collective law." Rowan stood beside her, their energies flowing together in visible currents. "My wife is now under Joint Earth Alliance protection," he stated firmly, the word "wife" carrying layers of meaning that transcended any traditional definition. Their bond was far deeper than any human marriage could encompass. Commander Vex's face darkened. "This abomination will not be tolerated. Prepare the suppressants." The other two enforcers raised their neural disruptors, but Nova merely smiled. She and Rowan joined hands, their combined energy field expanding. When the suppressant beam struck, it simply dissipated into their shared aura, transformed and absorbed. Impossible, Vex whispered, taking an involuntary step back. No, Nova corrected, her voice harmonizing with Rowan's. Evolution. Change. The very things the collective fears most. Their merged energy continued to grow, filling the room with swirling patterns of light. We are no longer separate beings to be controlled or divided. We are something new. Dr. Singh stepped forward, her professional demeanor masking her excitement at witnessing history in the making. I've already submitted our preliminary findings to the Galactic Science Council. They're quite interested in this unprecedented evolutionary development. She fixed Commander Vex with a stern look. Any attempt to interfere with their natural development would constitute a violation of multiple scientific preservation treaties. The enforcers' confidence wavered as they realized the political implications. The collective's influence was significant, but even they wouldn't risk openly defying both the Earth Alliance and the Science Council. Through their bond, Rowan felt Nova's fierce joy at their victory, tempered with sympathy for her former people. The collective doesn't have to be our enemy, she said softly. This could be an opportunity for genuine cooperation, for both our species to grow beyond our limitations. Commander Vex studied them for a long moment, his rigid worldview visibly struggling with the reality before him. Finally, he lowered his weapon. The collective will need time to process these developments. Take all the time you need, Rowan replied, drawing Nova closer. We're not going anywhere. Through their bond, they shared a private moment of amusement at the double meaning. They were indeed staying on Haven Station, but more importantly, their unity was permanent, unbreakable. As the enforcers retreated to make their reports, Dr. Singh began another round of scans. Your cellular integration is still evolving, she noted with fascination. The potential applications for medicine alone are staggering. Would you be willing to participate in some controlled studies? Nova and Rowan exchanged knowing looks, their shared consciousness already exploring the possibilities. Their union hadn't just saved them from the collective, it had opened doors to whole new realms of human-alien cooperation. We would be honored, Nova said, her tiny form nestled perfectly against Rowan's chest. After all, we're living proof that the greatest breakthroughs come not from force or control, but from trust, love, and the courage to become something entirely new. The medical bay's lights dimmed to accommodate their natural glow as they began working with Dr. Singh, their merged energy casting hope-filled shadows across Haven Station's corridors. Their story was already spreading through the station and beyond, a tale of love transcending physical form, of trust overcoming fear, and of two beings choosing to become something greater than the sum of their parts. Dawn of tomorrow. 6 months after their unprecedented joining, Nova and Rowan's quarters on Haven Station had become a testament to their unique union. The walls rippled with bioluminescent patterns that responded to their shared emotions, while gravity shifted subtly around them, accommodating both Nova's tiny form and Rowan's human stature with equal ease. Nova floated near their bedroom's viewport, her silver-flecked eyes reflecting the stars beyond. Her natural glow had evolved, now carrying hints of Rowan's human warmth within its ethereal radiance. Through their bond, she felt his approach before his footsteps reached her, his consciousness a constant, comforting presence intertwined with her own. The latest results from Dr. Singh's lab are fascinating, she said, turning to face him. Her delicate features lit up with excitement. The genetic modifications we've developed could help other mixed-species couples achieve partial joining. Not quite like ours, but enough to bridge their physical differences. Rowan smiled, reaching out to catch her as she drifted into his arms. Their energy fields merged automatically, creating the familiar sensation of completeness that neither had known was possible before their union. Making the impossible possible, he murmured, brushing his lips against her luminescent hair. You've certainly taught me a thing or two about that. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by an incoming transmission. The holographic display materialized, revealing the elegant form of first speaker Lunara from the Lemurian collective. Her expression was considerably warmer than during their previous encounters. Nexus Nova, Earthmate Rowan, she greeted them formally. The Council has reviewed your latest research proposals. We are impressed by the potential applications of your joining technology. Nova and Rowan exchanged knowing looks through their bond. The collective's gradual shift from hostility to cautious interest had been hard-won, but the promise of enhanced human-Lemurian cooperation had finally overcome their traditional isolationism. We're pleased to hear that, first speaker, Nova replied, her tiny form radiating authority despite her size. Does this mean the Council will support the establishment of the Joint Species Research Institute? With certain conditions, Lunara confirmed. The facility must be located on neutral territory, and all developments must be shared equally between our peoples. She paused, her luminescence flickering with what might have been amusement. We also request that you both serve as its primary directors. Rowan felt Nova's surge of joy through their bond. The Institute had been their dream, a place where humans and Lemurians could work together openly, exploring the possibilities their union had revealed. We would be honored, he said, speaking for them both. As the transmission ended, Nova floated up to eye level with Rowan, her silver eyes sparkling with mischief and love. It seems we've started quite the revolution, my heart bound. We? Rowan teased, pulling her close. As I recall, you were the one brave enough to attempt an impossible joining with a clumsy human in the first place. Nova's laugh was like starlight given voice. Brave? I was terrified. But something about you made me believe that fear wasn't nearly as important as what we could become together. Her tiny hands framed his face. And I was right. Their kiss deepened, energy fields merging until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Through their bond, they shared not just sensation but complete understanding, every hope, fear, and dream flowing between them in waves of light and emotion. Later, as they lay together in their gravity-adjusted bed, Nova traced patterns of light across Rowan's chest. Dr. Singh thinks she's identified why our joining was so complete, she said softly. It wasn't just my Nexus abilities or your human adaptability. It was our absolute trust in each other, our willingness to become something entirely new. Rowan caught her glowing hand in his, marveling at how her tiny fingers fit perfectly between his larger ones. Speaking of becoming something new. He hesitated, but Nova had already caught the direction of his thoughts through their bond. Her luminescence flared with excitement. The genetic compatibility tests were positive. We can actually have a child, yes, Rowan confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. Dr. Singh says it would be unprecedented, a true hybrid of human and Lemurian DNA. She can't predict exactly how they would manifest, but they would be like us, Nova finished. Something beautifully, wonderfully impossible. She floated up to kiss him deeply, her joy radiating through their bond. When can we start? Their shared laughter filled their quarters with swirling patterns of light. Outside their viewport, Haven Station continued its eternal dance among the stars, while inside, two beings who had dared to defy the boundaries of their species planned for a future neither had imagined possible. As Nova curled contentedly against Rowan's chest, their energies harmonizing in the peaceful aftermath of their lovemaking, she reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From her initial terror of the giant human who had found her, to the depths of trust that had allowed their joining, to this moment, on the cusp of creating a new life that would embody everything they had become together. What are you thinking? Rowan asked softly, though he could feel the general shape of her thoughts through their bond. I'm thinking about impossible things, she replied with a smile that illuminated the room. And how they have a way of becoming possible when you're brave enough to try. She pressed her tiny hand against his heart, feeling its strong rhythm synchronize with her own. I'm thinking about how fear can turn to love, and difference to strength, and how sometimes the greatest adventures come from trusting someone enough to let them change your entire world. Rowan pulled her closer, their merged energy creating a cocoon of warmth and light around them. Speaking of adventures, he murmured against her luminescent hair, "Are you ready for our biggest one yet?" Nova's answer was both words and pure emotion, flowing through their bond like a river of starlight. "With you, my heart bound, I'm ready for anything." Haven Station's night cycle deepened around them, but in their quarters, a new dawn was already beginning, the first light of a future where love knew no bounds, and the impossible was just another word for something that hadn't been brave enough to try yet.